$24 trillion. That is the value of minerals sitting under Africa's soil right now. The continent holds 30% of the world's mineral reserves, 55% of all cobalt, 47% of manganese, 90% of platinum. And yet, Africa generates less than 1% of global manufacturing output. How does the richest continent on Earth remains the poorest? Simple. There is a system designed to keep it that way. Picture this. Ghana grows 20% of the world's cocoa. Swiss companies make 40% of the world's chocolate. Ghana's profit from a ton of cocoa, $2,000. Switzerland profit from that same ton turned into chocolate, $20,000. 10 times the profit for adding milk and sugar. Ghana isn't allowed to make chocolate. Not legally prohibited, economically prohibited. Ghana's economy is collapsing. They need a loan. The International Monetary Fund, short for IMF, arrives with a briefcase and a document. Sign this, they say. We'll save you. The document is called a Structural Adjustment Program, SAP for short. It reads like a surrender treaty. To get the loan, Ghana must remove all tariffs protecting local industries, privatize state companies, focus on exporting raw materials, stop subsidizing local manufacturing. Ghana signs. They have no choice. Children are starving. Within 5 years, Ghana's textile industry, which employed 25,000 people, is dead, killed by Chinese imports that flooded in when tariffs disappeared. Same story across Africa. Nigeria signs, Kenya signs, Zambia signs, 36 African countries in total. Every signature is a promise. We will remain hewers of wood and drawers of water forever. But the trap goes deeper than you think. When African countries get IMF loans, there are conditions, not suggestions, conditions. Condition number 1, you must export raw materials. Condition number 2, you cannot restrict those exports. Condition number 3, you must remove barriers to imports. Sound reasonable? Let me show you how it works. Zambia has copper, lots of copper. They want to make copper wires add value, create jobs. The World Bank says no. If Zambia processes copper locally, they violate their loan agreement. The loans get called in. The economy collapses overnight. So Zambia exports raw copper at $6,000 per ton. China imports it, makes wire, sell it back to Zambia at $8,500 per ton. Zambia buys back their own copper processed by Chinese workers with Chinese profits. The African Development Bank president said it perfectly. Africa is essentially financing the industrialization of other continents. But wait, it gets worse. The World Bank counts this as growth. Zambia's GDP goes up. They're exporting more copper, the IMF celebrates. Another success story. Meanwhile, Zambian unemployment hits 80% because mining employs 50 people. A wire factory would employ 500. This isn't incompetence. This is design. Joseph Stiglitz, former World Bank chief economist, admitted it after he quit. The whole point was to make Africa a captive supplier of raw materials. What happens when countries resist? Ghana tried. 2010, they elected a president who said we're going to process our own cocoa.
We intend to process more and more of our cocoa in our country with the aim of producing more chocolate ourselves.
They built factories, started making chocolate, created 5,000 jobs. The World Bank's response was swift. First, a warning. Ghana is violating free trade principles. Then, consequences. Cocoa export taxes suddenly appeared in European markets. Ghanaian chocolate faced 30% tariffs. Swiss chocolate, 0 tariffs. The message was clear. Stay in your lane. But the most insidious punishment isn't economic. It is psychological. They call it technical assistance. The IMF sends experts to African finance ministries. These experts write the budgets, design the policies, train the staff. After 10 years, every African finance minister thinks like an IMF official. They genuinely believe processing raw material is inefficient. They argue against their own industrialization. This is how you colonize minds without firing a shot. Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's president, saw through it. In 1987, he said these programs are designed to recolonize Africa economically. 4 months later, he was assassinated. The new president immediately signed an IMF agreement. Let me show you the scale of this theft. Africa exports $400 billion in raw materials annually. If those materials were processed in Africa, just basic processing, not even finished products, they would be worth $2.4 trillion. That is $2 trillion stolen every single year. Where does it go? Follow the cobalt from Congo to your iPhone. Child mines it for 8 cents per kg. Chinese company refines it for $33 per kg. Apple buys it, which is worth $300 in your phone. Markup 3,750 times. The value addition happened in China. The profit stays in California. The child gets 8 cents. This pattern repeats everywhere. Nigerian oil becomes American gasoline. Ghanaian gold becomes Swiss watches. Zambian copper becomes Chinese electronics. South African platinum becomes German catalytic converters. Africa provides 70% of the world's cocoa but makes 1% of its chocolate. Africa has 65% of the world's arable land but imports $35 billion in food annually. Africa produces 50% of the world's gold but owns less than 1% of its gold reserves. The math is simple. Africa is the workshop, the world is the factory. But why Africa? China processes minerals, India manufactures textiles, Brazil makes aircraft. Then why can't Africa? The answer is, it is not about economics, it is about power. See, when Japan industrialized in the 1960s, they became competitors, but they remained allies. Same with South Korea, Taiwan, even China. Africa is different. Africa has something none of these countries have. Everything. 30% of the world's minerals, 65% of arable land, 60% of solar energy potential, 10% of oil reserves, 20% of fresh water. If Africa industrialized, truly industrialized, it wouldn't just be another competitor. It would be the competitor. An industrialized Africa doesn't need anyone. It has the resources, the energy, the food, the young population. Median age 19. But here's the real fear. Africa remembers 500 years of slavery, 100 years of colonialism, 60 years of economic manipulation. An industrialized Africa with that memory, that is not a trading partner, that is a reckoning. So the system isn't just about profit, it is about prevention. Keep Africa selling raw materials, they stay divided, 54 countries competing to sell the same cocoa, the same copper, the same cobalt. They undercut each other, fight each other. If you let them industrialize, they unite. They set prices, they demand justice. A World Bank executive said it off records in 1991. The last thing we need is united industrialized Africa. Can you imagine the leverage they would have? They can imagine it. That is why they prevent it. When China builds factories, the West competes. When India develops IT, the West outsources. But when Africa tries to industrialize, the West intervenes. Not because Africa can't, because Africa can, and that terrifies them. But the system is failing. The new battlefield is carbon. The European Union just announced a carbon border tax. If African countries industrialize, their products face massive tariffs for carbon emissions. Europe industrialized by burning coal for 200 years. Now they're pulling up the ladder. But Africa is finding ways around it. The plan is simple. If we can't export processed goods to Europe, we'll sell it to each other. Nigeria buys Ghanaian chocolate. Kenya buys Congolese batteries. Egypt buys South African cars. It is working. Intra-African trade increased 40% in 2 years. For the first time since independence, Africa is choosing its own economic path. The World Bank calls it resource nationalism. The IMF warns about economic isolation. The EU threatens consequences. They're terrified because if Africa industrializes, the entire global economic order collapses. No more cheap resources, no more captured markets, no more economic colonies. The question isn't whether Africa will industrialize. It is whether the world will let it. Every smartphone, every electric car, every solar panel depends on African minerals. The Green Revolution is impossible without Africa. For 500 years, Africa's wealth has built other continents. Maybe it's time Africa kept its own wealth. It is not a conspiracy, it is a business model. And like all business models, It only works if people don't understand it. But now you do. Thanks for listening.